Hello, you are listening to Just Films and That. This is the podcast where we talk about films we think might be underrated, underseen, or sometimes we just want to talk about them. I'm the host, Josh Hallam, and it's me again this week. We're just tackling another listener's suggestion. So we're encouraging you guys at home who listen to this to drop us an email to filmsandthatpod@gmail.com and tell us your suggestion for a film that you think might be underrated or underseen. Tell us the film, a little bit about yourself and why you think it's underrated or underseen. You can do it via an email or you can attach a voice note. That's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. That's just what Patrick did, as he has suggested David Cronenberg's The Fly from 1986. So spoiler warnings, if you haven't seen it, take a listen to this.
Hi there, I'm Patrick McKiernan. I am 42 years old and I'm a freelance sports journalist based in Belfast. I decided to pick The Fly because I do think it's an underrated film. For me, it's a total 5-star film and one of the best of the 80s. But it often gets overlooked because it's just because it's a David Cronenberg film and there's a lot of gore and violence in the film. It really overshadows what I would call a tragic love story between Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis's characters. In the movie, the first time I watched it, I was about 12 years old, and I actually was taken aback by how sweet and sorrowful the film was. So, I just think that would be a great choice, just to focus on the actual love story behind the gore.
So there we go. That is why Patrick has chosen The Fly. So a little bit underrated, but a little bit more of a focus on, I think, what Patrick's saying there is, he thinks there's more nuance to it in terms of why people should like it, not just as a horror film with that tragic love story in there as well. So if you haven't seen The Fly, then basically Jeff Goldblum plays a brilliant but eccentric scientist who's working on a teleportation device. During a self-experiment, it goes wrong because a fly slips into the chamber, which means he comes out of the chamber, basically being sort of spliced with the fly, leading to a metamorphosis into a half-fly, half-human man. As it deteriorates, his journalist lover, played by Gina Davis, has to sort of help him confront the tragic consequences of him, flying too close to the sun, shall we say. So just getting into the structure then, as always, we'll start with what we like, what I liked even, what I didn't like. We'll have a little look at the critical reception, and then we'll decide, is Patrick right? The Fly is an interesting one because I hadn't seen this, and I suppose you could, based on its legacy, you could call it a classic as well. But I'd never gotten around to seeing it. So let's get stuck into it then. Patrick, for starters, so glad you picked this. I really, really enjoyed this. So there's lots to like in there. As I said the last time I did an episode on my own, these episodes are a little bit shorter, so I'm not going to prattle on and on and on, but I could do about The Fly because I really, really enjoyed it. So getting stuck into it then. The characters, the cast, and the love story side of things. Let's go with that first, because that seems to be the main reason that Patrick's picked it. Jeff Goldblum, I think in recent years, he's become slightly more of a parody of himself, playing that eccentric, talkative, aloof, the Jeff Goldblum we all know and love from basically Jurassic Park and Thor and all the sort of stuff like that. But let's not forget, he's a wonderful actor. He's so good in this. He does eccentric so well. He's sort of neck and neck with Christopher Walken for who can do most eccentric, aloof genius. But Goldblum is certainly up there. As he does this descent into this transformation to this fly, the Brundle-fly hybrid, his physicality is brilliant. He has to sort of essentially start off as a normal guy who's pushing himself to his limits. Then he becomes basically a superhero, and then he starts basically mutating into this fly. And the way he does his physicality, the way he twitches, practical effects and the makeup and stuff like that as well. It cannot have been easy to act with this on, and he is just brilliant in it. The way he acts, particularly his physicality, thought he was brilliant. His character's really interesting as well. That idea of a protagonist and an antagonist wrapped up in one. He's such a tragic character. He is, it's very much reminiscent of things like Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis, this, as well as something like Icarus, not to be too sort of wanky film critic about it, but he's flown too close to the sun and he's feeling the consequences. And it does come through as a tragic character as he sort of descends into being eaten up by his own ambition. Gina Davis is great as well. She has some great emotionality in this. You really feel for her predicament as a character. I won't get too into the plot because I don't really want to spoil it for people, but basically as the emotional beats in the plot go on, it just sort of gets worse and worse for her, and you start to wonder who's actually suffering more here. Is it Gina Davis's character, or is it Jeff Goldblum's character? And I thought both of them were brilliant. Obviously, Gina Davis has a lot more to do emotionally, and I thought she really carried that side of the film. The chemistry between them works well. It is great as well. The love story, as Patrick said in his note, I think the love story really works. I think you buy them as a couple, and you really buy the sort of tragic, the tragic end, as I say, spoiler warnings. Although you have had nearly 40 years to watch it now. The direction of this as well, I thought the overall direction of this was absolutely superb. The way it's cut and shot and blocked and edited, it gives it a really zippy pace. The script's excellent as well. It doesn't overdo the science, but it makes it all make sense within the world of the film. I really like the use of genre signifiers, or in places lack of genre signifiers. Thought that really worked well to elevate the impact. Basically, it takes the impact it wants to give you of the genres of horror and a little bit romance and thriller and sci-fi, and it uses the signifiers to sort of play tricks on you. But by doing it, it elevates the impact of it. So there is music in it, but there's lots of sections where there is no music and there's a lot of ambient sound. So towards the end, it really slowly builds to quite a sort of disturbing and emotional ending, really. And I did find the body horror stuff really genuinely affecting. I don't normally find myself too affected by things like being horror or getting scared by horror, but I found it quite creepy towards the end, and I think that's down to the direction as well as the visual and the audible elements, and I thought they were brilliant as well. I mean, the effects in this, more or less, there's some aging, but more or less I think the effects hold up, and in places where they haven't held up, it still gives it some extra kitsch value. I still really appreciated the practical effects side of things. I thought the makeup looked brilliant. Again, fair play to Jeff Goldblum for acting in all that makeup, because it looks so uncomfortable and he does such a good job. But yeah, the body horror stuff works really well. I genuinely found it like quite gross towards the end. So as I said before, great use of ambient and absence of sound and music. So there's a scene where he sort of tests out his new and improved strength and his powers and stuff like that, and it's more or less all lacking in music. It's just ambient sound, and it really affected me. I just thought it was really, I don't know, it almost drew me in even more. Like the fact that the music was there was like the removal of white noise. It was like coming round from a dream or something like that. It's really interesting, I thought, and I think the whole thing almost had a purposeful and distinct lack of polish. I thought it gave it a really authentic and raw feel that really allowed the concept and the characters and the story to breathe. None of it's distracting. It doesn't skip a beat in terms of the choices the directors made in the visual and the audio and things like that. So yeah, overall, I love this. I thought it was brilliant. Dislikes wise, I struggled to come up with the dislikes for this. Really, I'd be tempted to say I didn't like the animal cruelty element with the baboon, but then we can't pretend animal testing doesn't go on, because it does, whether you like it or not. It's getting less and less, but I'm not an expert in that side of things, but I do know it still goes on. And B, aside from that, it does just go on to highlight the obsession of the character and what he's willing to do to achieve his goal. So I guess, that's something and nothing really there. The only thing, and I really, we always try and be balanced and give the likes and the dislikes on this podcast. The only thing I can think of is there is a stunt towards the end where Jeff Goldblum's character jumps through a window, and it did look quite dated to the point where I did let out a little chuckle. I'm not gonna lie. And where there's an element of expecting that with films like this, it was the only bit where I thought it really aged quite poorly. Critical reception then, getting into the critical reception. So just to remind you of how we do the scores, we get the IMDb, we get the 2 Rotten Tomatoes scores, audience and critics. We work out the average and we go off the average, and then we have a little look at the box office as well. So at the time of recording, over on IMDb, this gets 7.6 out of 10. The audience give it 83%, and the critics give it 93%, which averages out at 84% or 8.4 out of 10. Box office wise, did $60 million worldwide, but I do think Patrick picked it mainly because of the love story side and the fact it's underrated. I think in terms of it being underseen, its legacy is quite clear to see in terms of pastiche and parody and stuff like that. But going back to those scores, going back to that 8.4 out of 10, I'd say it's it's more or less right in terms of the score. I know Patrick said he held it in really high regard. I really, really love this 8.4. Maybe I could get that up to towards a 9, so maybe it's slightly underrated. But you know what? Overall, I really, really love this. And I do agree with Patrick when he says there's more nuance to this in terms of it being a tragic love story. I think a lot of people, they remember it for the makeup, and it's known for the makeup and things like that. A little bit like American Werewolf in London, and it reminded me very much of that in places. It's thought of as a body horror, or as sort of pushing the boundaries of the time for what was doable in terms of effects and makeup and things like that. But do you know what? There is more to it than that. It is a body horror, and the body horror really works. But there's loads of different genres at play here. I wouldn't, if it's anything, perhaps it is a horror. But there's sci-fi, there's romance, there's all sorts in there. So I thought that worked really, really well. Again, in terms of the legacy and the underseen side of things, it is one of those films that's been parodied to death. So perhaps it's not underseen. But then at the same time, I think you could argue how many people are going back and watching it now outside of film lovers, because I don't know if you really get it spoken of outside of the odd little bit of parody here and there. So I think it's well worth your time, and thank you very much for suggesting this one, Patrick. Hopefully that is the outcome you would have wanted. We'll be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, if you'd like to suggest a film, drop us an email, filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. Feel free to drop us a voice note or an email suggesting a film that you think is underrated or underseen, and do tell us a little bit about yourself. We're on all the social medias as well. If you search for Films and That on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube, we're on all that. Give us a follow. And just to finish, a rating or review goes a long way to helping other people find the podcast. So yeah, it would be great if you could leave us a good rating and review wherever you listen to this, if that's possible. All that remains to be said is thank you very much for listening. Thanks for sticking with us during all this rebrand. And yeah, we'll see you next time. It's goodbye from me. Cheerio.